Perfect.
Because you're the boss.
No way. Get out of here. Get out of here. Before I start, how's your day going though so far? You feeling good?
Yeah, so far until now, but this is the down part of my day.
Well, my plan was, in a
Just kidding.
if this is the worst part, then you can get better only from here. And you wouldn't know better if you didn't know how horrible this was going to be.
There you go. This is perfect.
I love it. All right, I'll just play like a little quick intro and then I'll start and just kind of like.
Okay, great.
This is the Like Attracts Like podcast with your host, Pat Mahan.
All right, beautiful humans, here we are today. I am on the podcast today with Neale Donald Walsch, a human that needs absolutely no introduction at all, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Neale has written 39 books on contemporary spirituality. He is also the popular author of the 9-book Conversations with God series. His writings have been translated into 39 different languages and helped wake people up to a new way of living and being in this world, myself included. So, Neale, first off, I want to say thank you for being here and thank you for the service that you provide to humans all over the world. I know that you don't really like to take personal credit for what has come to you and through you and the writings that you've shared with all of us, but it still takes a certain human being in the world to be brave enough and diligent enough to present these ideas to the masses. And so I personally want to say thank you for that.
Thank you for those nice words. Yes, I'm very clear, Pat, that that I simply, gosh, how to put it, kind of almost walked into a very special experience, and never imagined that anyone else would ever know about it. When I was having the experience at the outset, I've considered it a very private, sacred moment. It never occurred to me that anybody in China or Japan or Australia would even ever hear about it or know about it in specific terms. But then I was told in the conversation, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And I thought, you know what? This is interesting. That's a measurable outcome. Everything else I've been receiving was theoretical in nature, mystical. It could be, it could not be, who would know? But here was a statement, a fact. This will one day become a book. That was a measurable outcome. I mean, either it would or it wouldn't. Right. And you know what, Pat? What I knew was, well, at least what I thought I knew, there's not a publisher in the world who's going to say, I could just see the publisher running onto the workroom floor saying to his editors, hey, hold the presses. I got a guy here who's talking to God.
Right.
This is not going to happen. Nobody's going to publish that book. Right. My notes from that book. So I sent the handwritten notes to a publisher. And by golly, they published the book. They turned it into a book, which became Conversations with God, Book 1. Never in a million years would I have thought such a thing would happen, much less, not bragging, just noticing, much less that it would sell well over 2 million copies in 37 languages around the world.
Right.
So I thought, oh my gosh, what's happened here? What hath God wrought, as it was once asked? And I see now that this message is not obviously my message, but was given to me to share and to bring forward. And I think there was some symmetry to that, because I think that the universe understood perfectly well that I spent my professional years as a writer. I wrote for newspapers, I wrote for magazines, I wrote for a copy for radio stations. And so I was very familiar with the process of writing, and that made it fairly easy for me to turn my dialogue into a book.
Now, would you mind just sharing a little bit about, because I can imagine that who you are now and the messages that have come to you and again through you that you've shared, that they are a far cry from many of the messages you believed you were getting in the earlier stages of your life before this had happened. I would imagine, just like many of us, we pray a certain way, or maybe we don't at all, or we try to ask for things, ask for clarity, ask for direction. And many of those times, I would imagine in your life, maybe you did the same thing. What do you believe was different about this time that allowed this conversation to break through versus maybe any of the other times where you maybe asked similar questions about what do I do? What's happening? Where do I go?
Well, it's an interesting question, Pat, and I hate to destroy the entire premise
Yeah,
in
please.
in one sentence, but I actually did not have a prior experience. I was a pretty straightforward kind of a guy. I never questioned anything. What was going on is what was going on. What was happening is what was happening, and I wasn't too concerned about where should I go next, or what's the next path, or what's the next step for me. Largely because, at least professionally, my life was going extremely well. It seemed that no matter what I tried, I did well with it. I started off in broadcasting. I switched to newspaper work, and then I became an editor for other people's books. But whatever I did was falling into place fairly easily. I guess the only place that I wondered about what's next, or what's going wrong, is in my relationship life. But even that, Pat, to be honest, I probably should have asked questions like that, but I really didn't. I just went from one relationship to the other, kept on moving through those kinds of experiences. And so I didn't really ask those kinds of questions until,
Until.
until Pat, at the age of 49 or 50, I was ending my 49th year. I realized, I really do need to start asking those kinds of questions, because my relationship life was a total mess. I had gone through 6 marriages, not 6 girlfriends, not 6 live-in partners, 6 marriages.
At first, you don't succeed,
Yeah, well, exactly. That's how I felt. But at least you couldn't say that I was an emotionally unavailable male. But yeah, I was willing to make a commitment. I just wasn't willing to keep it.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting aspect of my personality then, as well. At that point in my life, my occupational life, my career was falling apart. And my health was going downhill. All 3 parts of my life, my health, my occupation, my relationship, all 3 aspects of my experience were crumbling at the same time. I had been laid off by the radio station where I was a talk show host, but they had to downsize. I was the last in, so the first out. And so I was out of a job. I was in terribly bad health, and I lost my relationship. There I sat in my pool of misery. And that made me very angry, because I thought I had done most of the things in my life, the way I should have. I obeyed all the rules, well, most of them. I didn't break any really major rules. And so I was calling out to God one night. What does it take to make life work? Okay, I give up. What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? Somebody tell me the rules. I'll play. I promise I'll play the game. Just give me the rule book. And after you give me the rules, don't change them, because my experience was that the rules of life are changing almost by the hour. So that's how I began this process, because as I began, and I really literally, it was the middle of the night, Pat. I woke up at 4:20 in the morning. And I marched out into the little living room where I was living in this little granny flat behind somebody's house. They had a little granny apartment back there, mother-in-law house, that was unoccupied at the time. I was able to rent it fairly inexpensively, which was good because I was out of work, but I did have a few dollars. And then I wrote an angry letter to God, in which I asked those questions. And as I was scribbling this angry letter on a yellow legal pad that happened to be on the coffee table in front of me, as I was scribbling out this angry letter, I began receiving answers to those questions. Almost I would have sworn there was a voice over my right shoulder. And then it became like thoughts in my own mind. But the answers to all the questions I asked, and to questions I never dreamt of asking, were suddenly given to me like a download. And I was writing as fast as I could to keep up with, almost like taking dictation, to keep up with the dictation I was being given. And of course, the information I was receiving in that way sponsored other questions. So I would ask the next question, and immediately the answer would come to me. I'd ask the next question, and immediately that answer was given to me. So again, I was writing as fast as I could write, and asking questions as quickly as I could ask, because I realized that somehow I had gotten in touch with a source of wisdom and clarity in the universe that was supplying me with answers I never would have dreamt of on my own.
Do you feel that, because it's common, many people, you know, they when certain aspects of the life that they created seem to not go the way that they initially had planned, or there's some kind of an existential crisis, if you will, where they begin to question things and actually not just ask for the answers, but want, I believe you said in the book, or you, it was spoken to you, do you want these answers or are you just venting? And I believe that so many of us can just vent and vent and vent. And then there comes a time when we need it most that we ask and then it's given and this answer comes through. But do you believe that it has to hit that point first? Or do you believe this is something that as people wake up to this idea that it's within us and it's something that we can allow as we become this voice, become this energy in the world? Do you think you have to go through this existential crisis to have this voice come in and be more clear? Or do you think there could be a different process that we could use to cultivate that in our life?
I don't think we have to go through any kind of crisis. I do not think. I
Right.
think that the voice, if we could describe it that way, that source, as I said, resides within us, and I think that we can develop the ability. I almost want to say on command to access, even as we would turn on our computer on command and access the information that's loaded into the computer ahead of time. So I think that we come preloaded with everything we really need to know, everything we really need to deeply understand about who we are and about life. And it's just about developing the ability to access that vibratory vibration, that energy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love that, because that's a question that gets asked on the show a lot, is because so many people seem to have to hit a rock bottom or some period where it comes in.
Well, I think what happens, Pat, to be fair to those people, is that we wait until we don't until then. Like in my life, I really didn't have a need. Really, I didn't have a perceived need to access that kind of information because life was, on the whole, going fairly well. I had a bump here and there, like all of us, but no major disastrous outcomes in my life. But after the outcomes began to pile up, the cumulative effect of my life, when I got to be around 48, 49 years old, I finally sat down and said, okay, obviously, there's something I don't fully understand here about life and about how this all works, the understanding of which would change everything. And so that's when I got to the point, and I think most people, are in the same category. The largest number of people, they don't feel a need to ask those kinds of deep philosophical, theological, spiritual questions. Metaphysical inquiry is not the order of the day. We're out there, just trying to get through life and doing what we think we have to do in order for that to be accomplished. So, but sooner or later, something, either it's cumulative or there's a single major event, one or the other. But something stops us in our tracks and we say, okay, clearly there's something I don't understand here about this whole process that we call life, the understanding of which would change everything. So what is it? And then we do, in fact, start searching for those answers. Where we search for those answers becomes a critical aspect of the process. Most people, from my experience and from my own life, search outside of themselves first. What I've learned, however, now is if I search first inside of myself, then an exterior search becomes unnecessary.
That's why I asked the question, do you think it's necessary? Because it seems like to to say that there is an awakening on the planet, which many people I've said, like, people are waking up to more and to a new idea of God without labels, and that exists inside of themselves, and then connecting inside of yourself to that and allowing that to be your focus primarily can shift your entire reality in the physical world as you become that which is within you, and then express that. You can inspire other people to do the same, which I believe you do innately, and I believe that your book series touches on completely. There was a question that I had regarding the dualistic nature of our world, of our reality and Earth, meaning the contrast of it, that you wouldn't know the euphoric bliss of your current life if that you're trying to create if you didn't know the contrasting aspect of what you didn't want, you wouldn't have that frame of reference to know all of these amazing things that are coming to you, or that you can allow by connecting with this source, or allowing the source to be inside of you and use it. So that's why I asked if it was necessary. You kind of answered a question in another interview that I listened to, where you were mentioning how we were a young species on this planet, because I had a question as to whether or not Earth, where we are, is it meant to be this euphoric Eden place? Like, or what is, not that there is a goal, but are we all to wake up and connect with that which is God within us and live in this perfect Eden with no contrasting experiences? Or is
Well,
this,
it's not an either or proposition.
that's what I was going to ask. Like, what do you believe, like, is the transition of humans on Earth?
Let me say, first of all, this is not an either or proposition. You laid it out in an interesting way a moment ago. You said, is it a Garden of Eden? Is it meant to be kind of a paradise, heaven on earth? Or are these contrasting elements supposed to be, the so-called bad side of life, if you please, supposed to be part of the process? And what I started to say was, wait a minute, it's not either or. It can be both and. Both a paradise, heaven on earth, and the presence of what I was told in conversations with God is the law of opposites, that you can't experience up without down. You can't experience fast without slow. You can't experience large without small. You can't experience what we call good without what we call bad. But when we understand how the law of opposites works, and when we understand why it's present, that it does create, in fact, a contextual field within which, as you noted, we can then experience the aspect of life that we choose to experience, then we wind up actually blessing that which we would have called bad even moments before. Which is why, interestingly enough, virtually every master teacher who's walked this planet, not just one, but almost all the master teachers, male and female through the years, have each said, each in their own way, but they've said some version of bless that which opposes you. Love your enemies and do good to those who would do bad to you, which is just the opposite of what we would mostly do intuitively. But when we see, this law of opposites has brought me what I want to call the other than, what it is I'm choosing now to experience and to call forth. And without the presence of the other than, what it is that I wish to experience, whether it's big, small, fast, slow, good, evil, whatever, would be impossible for me to enjoy. I couldn't experience that. So, but when I bless that which is the other than, I literally transform my experience of it. I may not change anything exteriorly, but interiorly, I change everything with regard to how I'm responding to the other than. And then, in fact, I allow myself to bless, to love your enemies, and bless that which seems to be opposing you, and turn opposition into opportunity. That's largely the message that I received in conversations with God. Which message, Pat, turned my life and my experience of what I was moving through completely 180 degrees.
Now, since that point, how long did it take? 3 years for the full to write the first book? How long was the first? How long did it take before they first started coming in until you actually were able to get the publisher to come in and then see your world shift? Because one of the questions,
I would say it was about I wasn't 3 years. I'm not sure. I can't have to remember. It might have been the better part of 2.5 or 3 years now that I look back on it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, because I kept on having these middle of the night writing experiences, but ultimately, but the change did not take 3 years. It might have taken 3 years from the time that the first messages came through, until the time that the books were published. But it didn't take 3 years for the messages to begin taking effect. I have to say that some of the messages, some of the more poignant and powerful messages, took effect almost immediately after I received those messages. let me give you one example, if I can, Pat.
Yeah, please.
If you'll indulge me here, I recall the one of the most impacting early messages. I asked God, what does it take to make life work? What am I doing wrong here? Obviously, there's something I don't understand. And I remember the response I got was almost a chuckle, not a derisive laugh, like we would laugh at somebody who's being simply stupid, but a kind of a chuckle that we would laugh at a 6-year-old who asks a lovely 6-year-old question, how many stars are in the sky? And we would chuckle at the purity and the simple innocence of the question. That's the chuckle I heard in God's voice when she said, oh, sweetheart, sweetheart, what don't you understand about life? It's so simple, honey, it's so simple. You think your life is about you, and your life has nothing to do with you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you understand that, you will then discover that the circle is complete. And in the largest sense, your life is about you because guess what? There's nobody else in the room. There's only other versions of you. Neale, sweetheart, there's only one of us. All things are one thing. There's only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is. And if and when you choose to move through life with that understanding, and then to treat the one thing as you would treat yourself, which someone brought up a few years ago called the golden rule. Simply, it's so simple, Neale. Just do unto others as you would have it done unto you. And that doesn't mean like in the big things, like don't steal somebody's money or don't go after somebody's spouse or don't try to take somebody's job. In the small things, like when you're driving down the highway and somebody cuts you off and you have a few perhaps choice words or maybe even a gesture that you show them out the side window of your car. Is that how you would want to be treated if you were just in a hurry somewhere and lost track of things and cut somebody off in traffic? I mean, so you do unto others as you would have it done unto you gets down to the smallest aspects of your daily life. What you say across the kitchen table, how you handle yourself in your neighborhood, how you respond to events in your city or town, and how you react to the world at large. So I began to decide that, I see, my life in that sense isn't about me. It's about everyone whose life I touch and the way in which I touch it. I still don't achieve what I want to achieve with regard to that, but I get better at it every day because now I know what I'm doing here. See, I had no idea what I was doing here before. I thought, okay, I get the agenda. I understand. My society and my culture taught me, Neale, is very simple. Get the girl, get the car, actually in reverse order, get the car, because you can't get the girl without the car. So it's get the car, get the girl, get the job, get the house, get the spouse, get the kids, get the better job, get the better car, get the better house, get the better spouse, get the better spouse, get the better spouse. And then, maybe get the office in the corner with your name on the door. And maybe even get the building on the corner with your name on the building. And then finally, you get the gray hair, get the cruise tickets, get the retirement wash, get the illness, and get the hell out. And that's the formula for life. And Pat, I was watching people right and left all around me, following that exact formula, the formula I just gave you. And I was one of them until I got to the age of 49. And I said, you know what? Excuse me. Hello, the formula isn't working. I'm not very happy. And I'm going to be 50 years old in a few weeks. I'm going to be here for a half century, and I can't seem to pull it together. What is it I don't understand? And that's when I began asking the questions and receiving many answers, including the one I just gave you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I definitely know the listeners of this show and myself included, and that was the story. That's it. There's some idea of that completion, or that for myself, like acceptance outside of myself, to this is the paradigm, this is the way that it goes, get these things. And be happy. It's in every commercial, it's in every advertisement, it's in every song. This is it. And similarly, you come to a point where you start asking different questions. And that's why I'm so grateful for your book. That was one of the main books that helped absolutely shift and make sense of. I felt when I read the first book, for sure, because I read it and reread it, that I felt like I was finally understood, but didn't know why. It wasn't an external understanding. It was showing me and teaching me how to connect to an internal dialogue that I never really never understood before. And I want to kind of lead that in, if I can, to I know I have a terrible glare here, but to your new book, to the God Solution, and talk a little bit about how very similarly that system of the labels and the external and the differences and the separation that human beings seem to chase and fight for and defend all of their times. It hasn't just been in the external egoic world of things or material or achievements. It's also been very much in how we identify that which we call God or a higher power. And that leads to so many things that we continue to struggle through. I was wondering if you could touch a little bit about how the new book, The God Solution, came through at this time in humanity, at this time in your life, and speak to that a little bit.
Sure, Pat. Thank you for the invitation to do so. I've been given a lot of thought. The first Conversations, the God book, came out 25 years ago, and there have been several books since then, as you've noted. But even with all of that having occurred, I was still left with a puzzlement of why is life the way it is in 2021? What if there really is a God? If there really is a higher power, why is the world such a mess? And one might think, well, maybe not enough people really believe in the higher power, but in fact, surveys taken all over the world, in every culture, not just in Western culture or Eastern cultures, but in all of the cultures of the world, the surveys show remarkably the same statistic, virtually identical numbers. 8 out of 10 people believe in some form of controlling power, in some form of higher power. So we have 80% of the people believe that there's something larger than us in the universe that's a higher power. But we simply, interestingly enough, with 80% of the people thinking that way, we can't agree on the simplest aspects of that higher power. We'll call it God, which is the word I happen to use in my vocabulary. We can't decide, what is it really? Who and what is God? What does God want? What does God do if God doesn't get what God wants? And how can we use God, or are we even allowed to use God in the movement through life? Is this higher power something that's accessible by us and is made for us to use? So we can't even come to an agreement about that. But here's something, interestingly enough, that most religions do agree on. Interestingly, by the way, when I say most religions, that's not a word, a phrase, I should say, that we should just let slip past the ear. Most religions means 4,300 religions. I didn't make that up. You Googled it, because I did a few months ago. How many religions are there? Recognized, organized religions on the face of the earth? Almost 4,300 religions on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Now, the largest number of those religions, and certainly all of the major religions, have an understanding or share a common belief about God. Here's the understanding that they share. And I'm bringing this up for a reason, because these understandings about God impact our understandings about ourselves. That is, we use God as our model. We are modeling our behaviors on the behaviors that we understand God to have embraced and demonstrated in life. So here are the behaviors that we understand that God is demonstrating. First, separation. God demonstrates the behavior of separation. That is, I'm separate from you. Don't you dare think that you and I are one. I'm separate from you. The second behavior, God is judgmental. God looks at what we're doing and judges it. God either approves or disapproves. really quite simple. The third characteristic of God, God is condemning. If God judges our behaviors to be unacceptable, God will condemn us. And the fourth behavior, God will punish us if we've been condemned. So we have come up with this idea that God is a separate, conditionally loving but conditional on the condition you do what God asks. God is conditionally loving, separate from us, judgmental, condemning, and punishing. Now that allows us to behave exactly the same way with each other on this planet. And we can do it with impunity because, hey, what's good enough for God is good enough for us. In fact, we are told actually to model our behavior on the behaviors of God. So we interact with each other in ways that produce conditional love, condemnation, punishment, judgments galore. You know, Pat, when I was a child, I was told by my religious teachers, I went to a Roman Catholic school. I was told that if I miss Mass on Sunday without a good excuse, if I'm caring for a sick parent, fair enough. Or if I'm old enough that I have to go to work and I have to work on Sunday, okay, fair enough. But if I just want to go to play a round of golf, or maybe go, when I was a kid, go to the playground and play some baseball with the other kids on the playground and miss Mass on Sunday, if I should get hit by a car on Monday and die,
Nope. Yep.
I'll go to hell. I will be punished by God with everlasting damnation, or maybe purgatory, maybe purgatory because it's not, a mortal sin, it's a venial sin, and purgatory is kind of like a suburb of hell. It's just you just burn off, and it's the same as hell, only it's not forever. But torture galore for missing Mass, the third Sunday in March. And this is the God I was told to believe in. I was told to believe in a God who watches our every decision, choice, and behavior and racks up the numbers: good behavior, bad behavior, good behavior, bad behavior. And if the bad behaviors outnumber the good behaviors, you're in big trouble. If you belong to the wrong religion, Pat, you could be a nice person. You could be kind and gentle and caring and loving, compassionate and generous and forgiving, all those things. But if you don't belong to the right religion, you're going to hell anyway. Because, you were maybe raised in the wrong part of the world.
Right.
Where the major religion was not the religion that is the right religion. And we actually believe in a higher power that makes these kinds of judgments. No wonder we have a planet where we feel justified in making the same kind of judgments. You're not the right race. You're not the right religion. You're not the right sexual orientation. You're not even the right nationality. We're going to put a wall up between us and you. Get out of here. What are you doing here? You're not even the right rationality. Worse yet, you're the wrong rationality, the wrong nationality. You're the wrong religion. You're the wrong sexual orientation. You're even the wrong gender. You're the wrong everything. Get out of here. And if you don't get out of here, we will punish you and literally put you in jail. That's how we have decided to construct human life. Now, the God solution asks a probing question. What if we're wrong about that? I mean, about God's behaviors. What if we simply don't understand? What if God behaves in an entirely different way? What if our definition of God is inaccurate? And so the God solution proposes a brand new definition of God. It proposes something that's pretty theologically revolutionary. Let's redefine God. And let's define God in 2 words. We don't have to get into 5 years or 8 years of theological seminary studies. Let's define God with 2 words: pure love. Supposing God were pure love, Now, when I say this in front of audiences, Pat, at lectures and so forth, someone will inevitably stand up and say, "Oh, Neale, we thought you were going to bring us something really revolutionary. You even billed it as revolutionary. God is love? That's not revolutionary. We all know that most everybody agrees that God is love." I said, wait a minute. I didn't say God is love. You didn't hear me say that. I said God is pure love, which is a particular kind of love with which most of us are not familiar. And then my questioner will say, okay, what's the difference? The difference is pure love needs, wants, requests, and of course demands nothing in return. Zero. It needs and wants and demands nothing in return for the giving of its blessings. Now that's daring to think in those terms. Dare we imagine a God who needs nothing in return? See, we believe in a quid pro quo God. You do this for me, I'll do that for you. You obey my rules, I maybe give you some of the things you're asking for. So it's a quid pro quo. Or better yet, it's a my way or the highway God. And what we are suggesting in the God solution is to give up the my way or the highway God, to give up the quid pro quo God, tit for tat. No, let's imagine that God wants, needs, requires, and asks for nothing in return. Supposing that after we do the thing that we call die, God simply says, welcome home. Good to have you back. And you can go back into physical form whenever you want. But then we would ask, well, why? What's the point of it? And the purpose of human life, as I've been told, is for us to expand our experience, our demonstration, and our expression of our true identity, which is each of us is an individuation of divinity. That's the God solution. And if we put that God solution into practice in our daily life, I promise you, your life will change virtually overnight. That's why I call it the God solution. And so many of the human problems, we're not talking about earthquakes and tornadoes, but the human-made problems, which is 90% of the devastation being imposed upon human beings right now. Do you realize that there's been, just to give you an example, do you realize that there's been armed conflict on this planet for 92% of recorded history?
I did not know that it was that high, but I've heard that there are very few periods of time where there has not been some form of conflict on the planet.
Do you realize that 1.5 billion people have gone through their entire lives and will go through their life without one drop of pure water? And then we wonder why there's dysentery and disease, and we wonder why people are dying all over the planet for these easy to solve problems. Do you realize that 2.5 billion people do not have indoor plumbing? I said 2.5 billion people, that's 1/4 of the human race, do not have toilets. 656 children die on this planet of starvation every day. No, I'm sorry. Every hour. Every hour. I made the mistake deliberately to try to catch you.
Yeah.
I wanted you to think, well, that's pretty bad. 656 children a day, but actually it's every hour dying of starvation while there's enough food on this planet to throw away. And restaurants from Paris to Tokyo and Los Angeles and back, enough food thrown away to feed an entire village for a week. What is it that we don't get here? What is it that we don't understand about how to live our lives together? Wow.
Yeah,
you know that almost 1.8 billion people don't have electricity? No electricity.
Yeah, I can't. If my power goes out for a couple of hours, I'm lost. It's a struggle.
And
So
we wonder why the world is the way it is, why there's so much of this going on, when there are so many billions of people saying, would it be okay? Is it too much to ask if I could just have a drop of pure water, one drop in my life, in my lifetime? Please? Oh, we don't have the technology. We can't possibly do that. Take care of yourself. It's every man for himself on this planet. It's not my fault. It's not our fault. Nothing we can do about it. Really? If we put the ingenuity of humanity's imagination to work, really nothing we can do about it?
yeah, and you speak in the book about this change that could and needs to and is happening when and you just referenced and it triggered it for me when you say, every man for himself, every human for himself. And it's so interesting that all that needs to shift is the idea of what that means. It's not that we don't take care of ourself, but it's that inner connection with ourself, this dialogue that you're speaking of, where that which you would call God or this higher experience comes in, that would reference pure love in yourself, with yourself, to yourself, and then recognizing the unity and the connection that you are also everyone else, and that they are other versions of you with an equal access of potential to the same connection, and to treat them as I believe you spoke so eloquently, that as they would want to be treated. And that if we go within, then we can really begin to make choices that would help the earth, the human race. But the idea of separation initially causes us to take care of ourselves in a different way. What do you believe the mechanism could be for us to continue in a world that isn't quite caught up yet to this idea? What could we do when we feel the problems are so great, and the answer is to go within and take care of ourselves in this connection of love way, so that we treat everyone better exponentially? What are some of the things you believe we could do to kind of get that ball rolling and the momentum rolling in that direction?
Well, first of all, we would have to change our fundamental idea about who we are and why we're here on the planet. And we would have to answer the question, what is the biggest problem in the world today? I've had a lot of fun with that question, by the way, in the past 4 or 5 years. I've been asking talk show hosts, journalists, and even politicians, chiefs of state, what's the biggest problem in the world today?
Yeah.
And the biggest problem in the world today is that no one knows what the biggest problem in the world today is. The biggest problem in the world today is the idea that we're separate from each other.
I agree.
The idea of separation is the biggest problem in the world today. It's what creates all the alienation that we're seeing running rampant on the planet wherever we look. So if we simply decided to toss out the idea of separation, but you see, the problem with that is it requires us to decide that we're not even separate from God, that we're not separate from anybody or anything. And that's almost too big of an idea for many people to embrace. So we have, in fact, embraced the notion, the whole cosmology of separation. Neale, you don't understand. We live in a cosmology of separation. So our cosmological construction is that everything is separate from everything else. You're not one with the tree outside. Please don't tell me you're a tree hugger. Are you going to be a tree hugger on me? You're not one with the tree. You're not one with the earth. Come on, grow up. So we live in a cosmology of separation. That would be bad enough if it ended there, but it doesn't, because our cosmology creates our psychology. We begin to have a psychological holding that says, I am separate from every other individual on the planet. Even that would be bad enough. But if it ended there, we might be able to get away with it. But it doesn't end there, because a separation psychology produces inevitably a separation sociology, that is, entire societies that form separate groups, political parties, organizations, religions, nations, and they're all separate from each other, each of them having their own, as you mentioned a while ago, each of them having their own individual agenda. And you know what? We might even be able to get away with that if it began and ended there, but it doesn't end there, because a separation Sociology inevitably produces a separation pathology, pathological behaviors of self-destruction, observable throughout human history. So we see that a separation theology creates a separation cosmology, which creates a separation psychology, which creates a separation sociology, which creates a separation pathology, which creates the world as it is today. Folks, I've given it all to you there in the last 2.5 minutes.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Amazing.
Now, what can the average person do? Move through the world in a particular way that says, I am one with you. You are one with me. We are one with the divine. And our opportunities to use this life to demonstrate, express, and experience that. And if we should choose to do that, we can change not only this day, not only how it is for us this hour, not only what kind of a week or year we're going to have. You can change your life and change your world. But if you think, well, it's more than I can do, it's more than I could do, then we have to call every great teacher in the history of humanity a con man. Jesus was a con man. Buddha was a con man. Muhammad, bless his holy name, was a con man. Moses was a con man. Mother Teresa was a con woman. They're all conning us. They're telling us that we can actually behave this way. Mm-hmm. They're telling us, do unto others as you would have it done unto you. But they're asking us to do something that's utterly impossible for us to do. So we've been conned. Or have we? Or have we been just too weak and lazy to take their word for it? What can the average person do? I'm going to offer you a radical suggestion.
I'm here for it.
In 2 parts. Part number 1. Act as if you are holy. Whoa. Dare we even do that? Act as if we are holy and sacred beings, divine individuations of God. Dare we claim that for ourselves, knowing all that we've done in our lives and all the mistakes that we've made and all the moments that we've had that were not really very sweet. Dare we now claim that and say, yesterday is yesterday and this is now. And I claim my divinity now. Not that I am God, but that I am a part of God, as a wave is a part of the ocean. The wave is not separate from the ocean. The wave is not other than the ocean. It's an arising, an individual arising of the ocean in beautiful, magnificent, glorious form. And when the wave is finished with its expression, it recedes back into the ocean, even as we recede back into that aspect of life we call divinity. So tool number 2, once you decide that you're holy, here's a little strategy that I use. Every day when I wake up, I decide to say to myself, don't say it out loud. Nobody will understand. Don't say it out loud. They're liable to ask you, by whose authority are you acting like this? So keep it to yourself. But in fact, say it to yourself. The first time you lay eyes on that other person that day, the first time you lay eyes on that person across the pillow, or across the room, or across the street, or across town, or across the world, the first time you connect with anyone by any way whatsoever, say to yourself, I have come that you may have life, and that you may have it more abundantly. This day, your day, will be made better for my having passed your way today. I promise you.
Oh, man. Yeah. I'm not even sure what to say, except thank you for that. Thank you so much for everything that you do, everything that you've done. We're just about to the end of our hour here. I just wanted to ask you, even with everything that you've given us, is there any one final thing that you'd like to leave any of us with, any of the listeners with, before we wrap up here and close this out?
Choose the God solution. Don't live anymore in the God dilemma. The God dilemma is what I announced earlier. If there really is a God, why is the world such a mess? Why doesn't God just solve it for us? But God's job is not to solve our problems. God's job is to give us the power and the free will to determine for ourselves what kind of life, individually and collectively, we choose to create. My final word, Gandhi said it perfectly. I couldn't put it any better. Be the change you wish to see.
I can't thank you enough for your time, for your presence, and for all that you do for myself and for everyone here listening. Again, I know we are all so grateful for you. I hope you have an amazing day, a wonderful night, and I wish you all the love in the world. Thank you again.
Thank you. Those are very nice words to hear from you, Pat, and I send the same energy right back to you. Thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity to share these ideas with your audience. I could, of course, be wrong about all of this, but I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Thank you again, Neale.
Bye for now.